Hello and welcome. You're watching WION Climate Tracker with me, Molly Gampir. A quick look first at what's lined up for you on the show. Storms have been battering parts of southern and central Europe. France, Italy, Austria all reported casualties caused by heavy rainfall in the last 24 hours have been devastating for France. Parts of the mainland were hit by an unexpected and violent storm. The island of Corsica in France was hit the worst. As the storm ripped through the area, it killed at least 6 people. The warning has now been lifted, but the storm has left behind a trail of destruction. Hail, heavy rainfall and winds peaked at 225 kilometers per hour. Boats and cars were seen smashed in some areas. Trees were uprooted across Corsica. Among the victims is a 13-year-old girl who was killed when the trees fell on her campsite, and a 72-year-old who died in her car after being struck by a beach hut roof. The residents described this as nothing that they have seen before. The French President Emmanuel Macron called an emergency government meeting. A natural catastrophe decree is expected to be approved next week, after which residents and businesses will be helped with compensation for the damage caused. In the aftermath, the French Interior Minister visited the affected areas to assess the damage.
Je veux dire à la Corse, je veux dire évidemment aux familles, notamment aux familles de touristes qui ont connu des décès ou des blessés graves, évidemment tout le soutien et toute la compassion de l'État qui, depuis ce matin, avec les agents de la collectivité, travaillent pour sauver, secourir et encore au moment où je parle, faire le bilan de ce terrible événement météorologique qui a eu lieu ce matin aux alentours de 8h, entre 8h et 9h du matin, où des vents extrêmement violents, non prévus, en tout cas non prévus dans cette intensité, sont venus arracher à la vie de l'île de Beauté 6 personnes, dont vous avez vu des enfants en bas âge, 20 blessés, dont 4 très graves, dont le pronostic.
The French National Meteorological Service saying the exact location of the storms is hard to predict. The worst is not over yet for France. More rainfall and storms are still possible after a record-breaking heat wave. France was hopeful that rainfall will bring the much-needed respite, but with it has come a violent storm adding to the destruction. The country saw more rainfall in just a few hours than in recent months combined. And the storms follow an intense heat wave which affected most of Europe. Experts saying that climate change will increase the frequency of extreme weather events. The increasing temperatures over the summer have led to intense drought, one that experts suggest is the worst in the past 500 years. According to the researchers at the European Drought Observators, the current drought is expected to affect 47% of Europe. Moisture content in the soil is expected to be in deficit. Another 17% of Europe could see its vegetation under stress due to lack of water. Farmers in France have already turned to tap water to feed their livestock after streams have been running dry. Farmers in Spain had to sacrifice their crops and trees. Firefighters are fighting raging and ever-increasing forest fires. Water levels in the River Rhine hit zero near the Dutch border. Factories may have to throttle production or halt it completely, as current water levels make it difficult to transport cargo. And with me on the broadcast this minute is Jos Timmerman, live from the Netherlands. Jos, thank you for being here. He's a senior climate and water expert at Waterframes. If you can start off by giving us a better sense of the drought situation in the Netherlands and the measures being undertaken by the authorities at this point.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for having me on the show. The situation in the Netherlands is that it's almost as dry as the year 1976 when we had a real dry year, but 2018 was the second, and now I guess we are on the third one. And so basically, what is now the measures taken is that farmers are not longer allowed to irrigate their lands, and that's the major measure that's taken so far. But we also see that there's a lot of problems with transport, with shipping, because the water level is so low that ships can only take less than half of what they usually can take. And that's, for instance, also a problem for Germany, because a lot of the products for Germany come through the harbor of Rotterdam and go through the Rhine up to Germany, which is a problem now there. We also see that there's maybe a problem with the energy situation, because the temperature of the water becomes so high that energy productions are no longer able to use the water for cooling, because they will also heat up the surface water, and that's not allowed according to the law. So there's a lot of issues going on at the moment in Europe and in the Netherlands.
Right, and speaking of which, and looking at the extreme weather events that Europe is grappling with, how could the continent have prepared better, according to you?
That's a difficult question. One of the things, of course, is to start with mitigation measures to prevent the situation from arising. So, for instance, last year we had this huge flooding in the south of the Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium, which was a combination of well, actually the rainstorm that was there stayed in the same area for a long time, which is not normal, which is a reason caused by reduction of the high speed circulation that's around, say, the North Pole, and we see that. Well, this is something that climate change is causing. For adaptation measures, there's several things we can think of. For instance, in the Netherlands, we started quite some time ago already with the Room for the River program, in which we allow the river to take more room if the water rises. And so flooding situations will not appear so quickly, but that's for the larger rivers and not for the smaller rivers, in which the problem last year occurred. And so, yeah, like the storm that was now in France. This is something climate change is causing. This was expected. More heavy rains, more heavy storms, also more drought, and a combination. And one of the things also is that when the soil dries out, the water uptake of the soil moisture doesn't work too good, and there's a lot of runoff on the surface and not the water is not easily going into the ground, and that causes flooding downstream. So there's so, well, if you talk about measures, what is important is that the soil is better protected. There's a need for other agricultural practices to reduce the reduction of organic matter in the soil. Well, what I mentioned already, the room for the river idea, to give enough room, give enough space to rivers, so if there's a high water situation, that they can spread out in a larger area, which is not always possible when you have a steep slope, but still there are ways to well, you can do buildings that are in a place that are not so prone to floods, and those measures can be taken and are taken, but not enough.
Indeed. Jos, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast.
Okay, thank you.
On to China now, which has issued its first national drought alert of this year, as the country battles scorching temperatures and a heat wave across the basin of China's Yangtze River basin. The national yellow alert coming after regions from Sichuan in the southwest to Shanghai in the Yangtze Delta experienced weeks of extreme heat. The yellow alert is 2 notches short of the most serious warning on Beijing's 4-tier color-coded weather warning system. This system is followed in the country to determine the intensity of extreme heat, with red representing the most severe warning, followed by orange, yellow and blue. Meanwhile, China has warned that severe dry spells along the Yangtze River basin could last well into September. And according to official forecasts, since July, rainfall in the Yangtze basin has been around 45% lower than normal, and high temperatures are likely to persist for at least another week. The severe heat wave across the Yangtze basin, caused by a larger than usual Western Pacific subtropical high, has lasted more than 2 months. And due to this continuous high temperatures, large areas of South China are now experiencing drought. The areas which have been impacted by the lack of availability of water include Sichuan, Hubei, Hunan and Hui. Meanwhile, Beijing has warned of the increasing risks of extreme weather in the country as a result of climate change. According to the Ministry of Water Resources, the extreme weather has affected water supply for more than 80,000 hectares of arable land, around 830,000 people and 160,000 large livestock in these areas. Moreover, factories in China's southwest have shut down, while many cities have imposed power outages after reservoirs used to generate hydropower ran low in a worsening drought. Companies in the Sichuan province, including makers of solar panels, cement, have closed or reduced production after they were ordered to ration power for up to 5 days. The order came after reservoir levels fell and power demand for air conditioning surged as a result of the scorching temperatures. Torrential rainfall hit parts of New Zealand for a 4th day on Friday, causing further disruptions and road closures from a storm that has already forced hundreds of people to evacuate their homes. Heavy rainfall continued to pelt New Zealand, with the city of Nelson being the worst affected. The weather forecaster Met Service said Nelson has had 172 millimeters of rainfall since Tuesday, which is more than double its average August rainfall. About 230 homes in the town of Nelson were evacuated and remains off limits overnight after the Matai River flooded.
We've spent most of the morning and this afternoon going around to assess damage here in Nelson, and it is quite extensive in parts. It's very difficult to navigate around Nelson at the moment, and that's because of surface flooding and landslides as well.
Residents found themselves isolated after landslides, fallen trees and floodwaters blocked highway access. The stormy weather also forced some schools to shut, airlines to cancel flights and businesses to shutter. Roads throughout the country were closed due to flooding and landslides.
It's going to be a long haul, and I think we need to prepare ourselves for that now. The emergency response will be an extended one. We have got damage throughout the city, and as we've said, we've got damage to people's homes and homes that are likely to be uninhabitable, and that is going to be a challenging scenario for many families.
After weeks and weeks of wet weather, the latest rainstorms are dumping more water into New Zealand's already soaked landscape. Experts blame the unseasonable weather patterns to a narrow stream of water vapor or an atmospheric river above the country. An atmospheric river has a 1 in 100 chance of occurring in any year and usually begins forming over tropical regions. Today is World Mosquito Day. Mosquitoes are more than just unpleasant summertime bugs. They carry deadly diseases which claim the lives of over 500,000 people annually. The day commemorates the day malaria parasites were discovered in 1897, and this revelation completely changed how we understood the blood-sucking insects. Although more creative prevention strategies and medicinal treatments have been developed over time, climate change has given rise to a boost in mosquito population. New diseases have been detected across the world, especially in America, and this has resulted in a boom in the spraying industry, which has bad news for the environment. Our next report getting you the details. Take a look.
This is an increasingly familiar sight in the American cities and suburbs. Workers spraying yards for mosquitoes. These blood-sucking insects have long been a global headache, a bane for backyard barbecues and carriers of serious diseases in the tropical nations. Now, climate change has widened the insect's range and extended its prime season. More and more Americans are now resorting to professional yard spraying. The industry is booming this season.
Well, if you like to be outside, it certainly makes it more pleasant not to be swatting mosquitoes and worrying about, all the issues. And if you have pets, it certainly makes it summer more enjoyable not to have to be concerned about ticks on them.
But the chemical bombardment is beginning to worry scientists. The overuse of pesticides is harming pollinators and worsening the growing threat to birds. According to the journal Biological Conservation, more than 40% of insect species worldwide are threatened with extinction, including some pollinator bees and butterflies, and spraying companies are multiplying with a surging demand. They claim that they are trying to minimize pollinator losses, but there's collateral damage which cannot be ignored.
Yeah, if you're using a toxic chemical that's toxic to certain types of species like insects, you might expect to see some collateral damage.
We need our pollinators, right? They're incredibly important, but at the same time, we need to eliminate mosquitoes that vector diseases.
In 2020, the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported dramatic increases in illness spread by mosquitoes. And the West Nile viruses have turned up in the US. Asian tiger and yellow fever types of mosquitoes are now common in southern states. Then there's a Michigan mosquito season. Meanwhile, the revenue from mosquito spraying has soared. Exterminators are adding mosquitoes to their traditional services. The federal government says chemicals are safe for humans and mostly non-toxic to birds. But they are deadly to fish and bees and kill insects, which is the source of food for birds. The Mosquito Control Association says companies first should clear out mosquito breeding areas and spray only when needed.
One of our dogs likes to eat wood chips from the landscaping. I haven't figured out how to stop that yet. But if he's going to do that, and there's a synthetic insecticide on it, that's a great concern.
Climate experts say that warm weather varieties of mosquitoes are increasingly turning up. It facilitates the boom in mosquito population. Increasing temperatures enable mosquitoes to survive at higher latitudes, extending the season when mosquitoes and viruses can proliferate. This increases the risk geographically and seasonally. So keep in mind to use preventive measures to lower the risk of mosquito-borne diseases. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The Jordan River is of symbolic and spiritual significance to many, since the Bible says this is where Jesus was baptized. Parts of the river are running low because of water diversions from the river and pollution, but efforts to save it are complicated by the decades-old Arab-Israel conflict. Our next report, getting you the complete story. Take a look.
The Jordan River is Christianity's third holiest spot. Christians believe John the Baptist baptized Jesus at the site, in a lush stretch of the Jordan River flanked by desert. The baptism marked the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. Many modern-day visitors wear white robes and immerse themselves in the sacred waters. In a show of faith, some bottle up some of the river's waters as a holy keepsake.
Baptized here, now it's holy water, so I took some holy water because in my religion we use it many times throughout the year, so it's good to actually have real holy water from the source.
The river's history and its water have been as politically fraught as holy. For decades, landmines have lurked menacingly on banks that were once a war zone. Now, much of the Jordan River is a bad-smelling, weak flow of water. After decades of diversion for agriculture, the 1994 peace treaty between Israel and Jordan, decades-old Arab-Israeli conflict, rivalry over precious water in the Jordan Valley, but the biblical Jordan River must have looked dramatically different from its current state.
I'm sure God above is also sad that so much global warming, etc., so many things have happened, to what he thought was probably going to, nourish us forever. So that part makes me feel really sad, to be honest.
Only two sites are holier to Christianity. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, where Christian belief says Jesus was crucified and resurrected, and the Nativity Church in Bethlehem, the site where Jesus was born. Several churches were built on the banks of the Jordan as early as the 4th century. By the 1930s, Greek, Coptic, Syrian, Catholic churches, among others, had plots in the river valley, erecting golden domed shrines and other structures.
We can just simply imagine John's baptizing the believers here, eating wild honey and locust, waiting for the arrival of Jesus Christ. And the wilderness that we see surrounding the cave where John lived is the wilderness John the Baptist described himself living in.
But championing the international revival of the Jordan River without reopening disputes can be a challenge. A stretch of the river was a hostile frontier between once warring Israel and Jordan. River water also separates Jordan on its eastern bank from the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The Israeli government has pledged to help rehabilitate the lower Jordan River. The Israel Water Authority says that it would be increasing the volume of water flowing from the Sea of Galilee within the next 5 years. The project entails the construction of a pipeline, pumping stations, reservoirs, and renovating an existing dam.
This is the first most important plan to revive a river in the last 20 years. The last time we had such a big project was in the restoration of the Elkhorn River in Tel Aviv, in the central of Israel. And the importance of the Jordan River, of course, is its cultural, biblical, religious importance, and therefore it's so important to revive and to invest into this specific river. The plan is to finish it by 2025, and by then, each year, from almost 30 million cubic meters of water that flow there today, we are going to have an addition of another 40 million cubic meters annually.
According to the World Bank, Middle East and North African nations face the greatest expected economic losses from climate-related water scarcity. It is estimated at 6% to 14% of GDP by 2050. Maybe the significance of this Jordan River will only remain as a symbol of spirituality, a fable of long gone past.
Brutal summer looming over rural Spain, but one unexpected side effect of the country's worst drought in decades has delighted archaeologists. The emergence of a prehistoric stone circle, popularly known as the Spanish Stonehenge, found in the Valdecañas Reservoir. The prehistoric circle of stones, first discovered in 1926, is finally exposed due to the drought. We're leaving you with these visuals. Thanks very much for watching.
Guadalperal is a collective tomb. Burials took place in it for more than 2,000 years. So everything that was found there in the 20s are remains of the trousseau that accompanied the dead.